The year is 1989, and Germany is split in two. Two systems, two ideologies, two countries. But soon, one of those systems will come crashing down. The Federal Republic of Germany in the West is a capitalist NATO-allied democracy. Meanwhile, the German Democratic Republic in the East, despite its convincing name, is a communist Warsaw Pact dictatorship, led by Erich Honecker, who has been in power for 18 years at this point. But something is changing in East Germany. The people are fed up with not being able to travel and having to drive around in their little Trabants. In East Germany, the GDP per capita is about $8,400, and just miles away, their West German counterparts are more than twice as productive. East Germany also suffers from higher unemployment and lower incomes, so unrest in East Germany is understandably brewing. And Western pressure, especially from the United States, is growing.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The people of East Germany protest, and protest some more. Eventually, under the mounting pressure, Erich Honecker resigns. Since 1961, a physical wall has separated the people of the eastern and western halves of Berlin, and those who try to flee are promptly shot. No one is to leave without express permission from the government. On November 9th, 1989, an East German official with an atrociously long title mistakenly announced that East Germans would now be able to cross the border freely.
Das tritt nach meiner Kenntnis ist das sofort.
The announcement was intended to be a part of a gradual reform plan, but was misinterpreted as being an immediate change. And as a result, thousands of East Germans rushed across the border in order to get a taste of freedom. The border guards were simply overwhelmed and eventually allowed everyone to pass through freely. Berliners on both sides came together to tear down the ugly wall that had divided them for decades. And so the Berlin Wall had fallen. And with that, the foundation for the reunification of Germany had been set. In October of the following year, the 5 states of the GDR were officially integrated into the Federal Republic of Germany. And so the Germany we know today was born. So my intelligent viewer, I hear you ask, how could Germany still be divided today if it, came together, literally? Well, my friend, communism has left noticeable scars on Eastern Germany. Today, there are a bunch of subtle differences that still divide the country. To highlight a few, this map shows the dominant religions across Germany, with the former areas of East Germany being significantly less religious than the rest of the nation. This map shows the median income across Germany, with the Easterners still earning lower wages to this day. Politically, more radical parties see greater success in East Germany than they do in the West. The East is less densely populated than the West. The East receives more Vietnamese and Polish immigrants, while the West receives more Turkish immigrants. More Eastern Germans have their children in childcare. Farms are bigger in East Germany, and the differences go on and on and on. Even the city of Berlin is visibly divided by the color of its lights. To understand just how we got here, we need to go back to 1945. Yeah, not the best year for Germany, 1945. I'd say they'd had some better years than that. So anyway, the year is 1945 and World War II is coming to an end. The Germans are being pushed back and invaded by the Allies from all sides, now in German territory. In the West, the Americans and British push eastward, and in the East, the Soviets are barreling towards Berlin. Soon, Germany is defeated, World War II is over, and Europe is liberated from fascism. How nice. After years of fighting and bombing, Germany has been absolutely ravaged, and the nation has suffered over 6.6 million military and civilian casualties. The Allies now meet in Potsdam to structure the New World Order and decide Germany's fate. Just look at how close and friendly the Soviets are with their American and British allies. Surely that will last forever. Anyway, they decide to divide Germany into 4 zones occupied by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the USSR respectively. Furthermore, the city of Berlin was also divided similarly, being split into 4 zones. That is until 1949, when despite Soviet efforts and even an imposed blockade on West Berlin, the American, British, and French occupied sectors were merged to form the Federal Republic of Germany, a capitalist democracy comprising roughly 69% of modern-day Germany. Meanwhile, the Soviet sector became the German Democratic Republic, ruled by the Socialist Unity Party, or SED in German, obviously, because SED is not Socialist Unity Party in English. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. And so, East and West Germany were born. The two Germanys fell on different sides of the Cold War. Europe itself was divided by the Iron Curtain, which plowed straight through Germany. As such, West Germany experienced an economic boom in the 1950s known as the Economic Miracle. However, East Germany didn't have as strong of growth. To help rehabilitate its European trading partners, the United States provided economic aid to several European nations as a part of the Marshall Plan from 1948 to 1951. It contributed a total of $13.3 billion of aid, or about $150 billion in today's money. And of that $13.3 billion, West Germany received $1.4 billion. East Germany, falling under the Soviet sphere of influence, received nothing. Not a crumb. On top of that, the Soviets demanded harsh reparations from East Germany. The Soviets even dismantled a large portion of East Germany's industrial capacity and transported it back to the USSR. That is some Soviet activity if I've ever heard of it. Taking your opponent's buildings after you beat them in a war. I don't know, man. Even though West Germany also had to pay its own reparations, East Germany was treated way more harshly. Additionally, East Germany was now largely cut off from international trade, only primarily trading within the Soviet communist bloc. And of course, socialist mismanagement also hurt the country. For one, farms across the nation were collectivized under a process called constructing socialism. The East German government also fought private trade and pushed heavy industrialization. So as a result, food shortages in East Germany began to become a problem in 1953. Being forced to put up with all of this, East Germans had had enough. On June 16th, 1953, construction workers in East Berlin began to participate in strikes against the work quotas that were set against them.
From East Berlin, a very different story. These are the first pictures of the grave riots that followed a strike by some 50,000 workers. In protest against their living conditions imposed by the communist regime, they called on the government to resign and demanded free elections.
From there, the protests grew and soon evolved into a widespread uprising across the nation involving 1 million people. The people were sick of declining living standards and forced Sovietization. The protests grew so out of control that the Soviets even rolled their tanks into Berlin. Again, it's estimated that at least 55 to 125 people were killed. But eventually, the protests died down and people got back to work. As the years progressed, economic well-being in the West remained significantly higher than it was in the East. In 1960, the West German GDP per capita sat at around $8,400, while the East German GDP per capita was just $3,900. While West Germany had redeveloped industrially, East Germany was definitely lagging behind. In West Germany, consumer goods were plentiful, and they were known for being incredibly high in quality, with German engineering being some of the best in the world. However, in the East, comparatively limited industrial capacity caused shortages and the production of lower quality consumer goods. Take, for example, what Germany is probably known best for. Not starting world wars, but cars. Germany has a thriving auto industry. And if you take a look at the nation today, the vast majority of its major companies, including its auto companies, are located in what was once West Germany, with of course the exception of this cluster in Berlin, the nation's capital. During the division, the majority of Germany's skilled engineers lived and worked in the West, and many of East Germany's engineers fled west in search of better lives. While brands like Audi, BMW, Volkswagen, and Porsche were and are still known for their high quality and performance, the same cannot be said for the cars of East Germany. Trabant was a state-run automaker founded in 1957. It was East Germany's most popular car brand and renowned for, well, being crap. The cars were slow, loud, inefficient, and known for having pretty bad build quality. On top of that, East Germany's planned economy was way less efficient than West Germany's free market economy. East Germans who wanted a Trabant had to wait over 10 years to get one. Holy crap! Life was not great in the GDR. And so, while West Germany was experiencing a population boom, East Germany found itself bleeding. The border between East and West Germany was closed. However, Berlin was a major loophole. So while East Germans were forbidden from crossing into West Germany through this border, they could simply wander into West Berlin and by extension West Germany. And so, people did. Doctors, engineers, and other skilled workers fled to West Germany through West Berlin.
We're gonna build the wall. We have no choice. We have no choice. Build that wall. Build that wall. Build that wall. Build that wall!
The year is now 1961, and East Germany needs to end this mass exodus to the west. In Berlin, they begin the construction of two 155-kilometer-long walls separated by a fortified no man's land, which will become known as the Death Strip. Those who dare to escape will be shot. Berlin was no longer a city divided by just ideology. The two halves of the city were now physically isolated from one another. The Brandenburg Gate, Berlin's most famous landmark, was now walled off. Families who lived on opposite sides of town were now split. Before the construction of the Berlin Wall, roughly 3.5 million East Germans had fled the country. However, migration out of East Germany would flatline after the construction of the wall. For the East German government, the wall was an incredible success, but still the nation's problems persisted. After all, the wall was kind of like using a band-aid to cover up a bullet hole. Was that a good comparison? Probably not. I don't know. You get the idea, though. This brings us to the 1980s, a time of major change for the Eastern Bloc. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became the leader of the Soviet Union, and unlike his predecessors, predecessors, he was very reform-minded. Through his policy of glasnost, or openness, he introduced social reforms like increased freedom of speech and expression, and through perestroika, economic reforms allowed individuals and businesses more freedom to produce and consume. These changes had ripple effects all across Eastern Europe, including East Germany. Cracks began to form in the Eastern Bloc, with Poland being the first country to ditch communism in 1989. East Germans, being tired of falling behind their West German counterparts, wanted to do the same, and calls for unity between the two Germanys grew. By 1989, those calls had become so strong that they culminated in the peaceful revolution and the fall of the Socialist Unity Party. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, East and West Berliners came together to tear down the Berlin Wall, and in 1990, Germany was whole again. But as you know, this isn't the end of the story. Reunification has been very expensive for Germany. Since the 90s, the federal government has poured over $2 trillion into the eastern part of the country. The mark left by communism on Eastern Germany persists to this day. There are physical signs like communist architecture and former border marks in Berlin, but the social and economic differences are still around as well. Ultimately, East Germany's problems weren't magically erased by reunification. For one, the social benefits that East Germans were used to, like subsidized housing, were pretty much gone now. Additionally, a lot of East Germans report feeling like second-class citizens, as perceptions of Western dominance persisted, which makes sense when you think about it because East Germany was sort of joining the West. It wasn't like they were creating a new Germany. After unification, the German government offered East Germans an exchange rate of 1 Ostmark, which was the currency of East Germany, for 1 Deutsche Mark, which was the currency of Germany. The problem with this was that the Ostmark in reality was pretty much worth nothing in comparison to the Deutsche Mark, which was one of the most valuable currencies in the world at the time. Because of this, Rolf Langhammer of the Kiel Institute for the World Economy says, quote, East German companies suddenly had to pay the same nominal wages in a currency worth much more than the old Ostmark. Ultimately, the currency change caused an expensive shock in the German economy. Of the $2 trillion the government has spent on Eastern Germany, over half was spent on unemployment benefits, welfare, and pensions. From 1949 to 1989, a total of 4 million East Germans fled west, the vast majority of them doing so before the construction of the Berlin Wall. This was equivalent to a sixth of East Germany's population. For scale, that would be like 55 million Americans packing their bags and moving to Canada over the next 40 years. This major shift helps partially explain the persisting difference in population density between the East and West that we mentioned earlier. The economic disparities between the two really help to explain a lot of the differences between them today. For instance, today the median age in East Germany is several years higher than it is in the West, which is largely a result of younger Germans moving west for more economic opportunities. Economic differences also play a role in influencing immigration. Today, with more economic opportunities being in the West, immigrants move to the West far more often than they do to the East, with Berlin of course being an exception. As you can see here, the percentage of the immigrant population in Thuringia is just a fraction of that of Hessen, despite the two states literally being right next to each other. Overall sentiments regarding immigration are also notably different. Germany's right-wing AfD is a party that opposes immigration to Germany. As you can see here, more people in East Germany vote for the AfD than they do in West Germany, possibly suggesting a stronger anti-immigration sentiment in the East. The relative popularity of the AfD in the East could also be fueled by those economic differences we talked about earlier, as the party promises pretty radical changes in a lot of areas. And when people are relatively poor, they do tend to prefer change a little bit more. As a totalitarian state, East Germany cracked down on freedom of speech, expression, and religion. And today, the divide between the irreligious East and the mostly Christian West is blatantly obvious on a map, pretty much perfectly following the former border between the GDR and West Germany. A combination of lower immigration to the East and lower religiousness has also led to there being far fewer mosques in the East. Overall, the list of subtle differences between the eastern and western parts of Germany is a long one. Germany is a unified nation, but hints of its divided past are still visible to this day. And I hope I've been able to show you a little bit about why that actually is. East Germany was governed much differently than West Germany was, causing a lot of the differences that we see today. I hope you learned a thing or two about Germany, and until next time, goodbye!
Minnesota!